Why is it that throughout the history of cinema, we've been endlessly intrigued by watching people change into monsters? Don't look at me. All I know is that movie audiences clearly have an insatiable desire to see Jekyll turn into Hyde, men become werewolves, and aliens evolve into, well, just about anything technology can manufacture. The most recent chapter in the long history of transformation movies was Terminator 2, which last year wowed even hardened aficionados of the genre with its new generation of computer effects known as morphing. So now there's another weapon available to filmmakers in their constant battle to create ever weirder and nastier creatures. Moving Pictures spoke to the directors and award-winning special effects artists responsible for some of the most hair-raising and bone-crunching movies of recent times. We asked, why do audiences hunger to see humans and aliens change shape? And is finding a way to transform a head into a spider really a job for a grown-up?
A lot of the people involved in making movies about werewolves and such like are basically overgrown boys who really love playing with the toys and equipment and just the process of actually transforming someone into a werewolf.
It basically rocks like this.
Yeah, it's a reciprocating motor that basically gives it this action.
It actually bites through the flesh, and then the amputee pulled his arms out, and you see the flesh rip, and then he looks at his arms like this, and the amputee actually had this much of his arm left.
I live in my own little world, you know. I'm kind of happy in my own little world, you know, with my little rubber monsters and my, isolated from the rest of the thing. I mean, I'm really pretty uninformed about what real life is about.
One of the things about transformation films is they take our idea of reality and they bend it. They take, if you're the object of the hideous transformation, your idea of identity no longer holds.
One of the most striking things in the history of the movies is that the transformation sequences are far more common now than they were before. You know, at some level, it seems like a rather primitive idea. You know, conceptually, the idea of bodies being transformed is not such a deep idea that you would think our sophisticated time would be interested in it.
Transformations are a really interesting thing for me in the context of computer animation. The computer is so well suited to things that change in time. If you can develop a description of how things metamorphose or animate, the computer can carry that out ad infinitum. You can make up the rules of your world, as it were. You know, you don't have to worry about gravity. You don't have to worry about whether or not your camera can fit in a certain space. You don't have to worry about how much light you have to film with. You don't have to worry about going to some weird location. You can shoot things at totally different places and put them together in the computer, or you can create an environment that doesn't even exist, that is impossible to find.
How much more real can they get? What's the next step? What's the next transformation? How do you go further than Terminator 2?
The seamlessness of a computer-generated effect, in theory, should be able to heighten the pleasure of the audience. Because audiences have gotten so sophisticated that they now look for the trick. And as soon as they find the trick, their pleasure in a transformation is diminished. So that insofar as you can make the transformation seamless, it actually makes people enjoy it more.
When you see an older film that has special effects like the John Barrymore, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, you have to try to imagine what it would be like to be an audience seeing that for the first time. And when you put yourself in that place, so you're imagining not just who you are now, but who you would have been seeing that for the first time, That's terrifying. There was something so fascinating about watching this transformation, and he does the first transformation without any makeup. He just makes a face, which sounds silly, of course, but that face he makes is so malevolent, so evil, and so frightening you think you're seeing the dark side of Dr. Jekyll, which indeed you are. It's Mr. Hyde, which I think is pretty close, isn't it? And that, I mean, I'm hiding the truth. I'm making fun of my younger self doing it, but Barrymore isn't, and he's, I mean, I think he may have scared himself if he looked in the mirror and saw that, and I'm sure it scared audiences at the time.
I'd seen some of the Jekyll and Hyde movies. Actually, it was quite a while before I saw the Frederick March one, which I always wanted to see because I remember my father saying he saw it as a child. And he had to hide his face whenever Mr. Hyde was on because it really frightened him. And I went, I want to see this, you know. And when I eventually saw it, I saw that it was actually quite a clever transformation. They did an interesting trick that you can do quite well in black and white with a red and green filter and red makeup, where you can actually paint the shadows on a person's face in red makeup and put a red filter on the lens and you don't see it. And then when you change it to a green filter or a green light, they turn out to be very dark.
I thought that was really good, you know. And he looks really good too, you know. He looks very animal-like, you know. I think he's got too much lipstick on though, in one shot, you know. But other than that, I thought he looked pretty damn good. But I would never put lipstick on a guy that looks like that.
When I remember back as a kid, I always wanted to be the Wolfman because he could, you know, he could turn into something and change at any time. And I think it was that that dream of having that ability of changing yourself that I think everybody has to some degree. The transformations really sort of helped solidify and fortify in my mind as a kid. Was that like that was a cool thing to do?
I was fortunate as a kid to have pretty understanding parents. And my father is very artistic and had more than the average person's knowledge of how this stuff was done. So when I asked my dad, you know, how did they do that? You know, he understood what a lap dissolve was, and he said, you know, they put a little makeup on and they filmed it, and then they did the next stage and they overlapped. And that's why in between, you know, when he has a little more hair on his face, sometimes he's a little bit over here and a little bit over here, his shirt ruffles around, you know. So I was able to start thinking in those terms and how things were made even as a child, which was helpful. I always thought it was kind of weird that, you know, he takes off his shoes, but he still has his, you know, his pleated pants and his shirt on with his collar buttoned, you know, when he's this monster, you know, it's kind of weird. And that, again, was something in American Werewolf that John Landis wanted to do, was not just see the transformation here, but see the entire body change and have this nude man change into a creature, which sounded exciting to see this whole body transform.
Please! Help me! Help me! Yes!
It certainly looks to me as if a man turns into a wolf on screen. I remember sitting in the theater and thinking, how did they do this? What, did they actually get a werewolf? And if so, I mean, is he a SAG member? I mean, is he, you know, what kind of hours does he work? Can you control him when he turns into a werewolf?
We could make parts of the person that were, you know, made out of rubber or whatever that we could actually change easier than we could the actual person himself. So an actual physical prop hand that would stretch, that, you know, when it's framed out here, you know, you can't tell that it's not the actor's real hand. The original idea came from the fact that I thought about having hair grow on the person's face without doing lap dissolves. I figured you could do it in reverse by pulling hair in. You couldn't do that on a real person's head, so I thought if we made a likeness of this person and then punched the hair in it and then pulled it in, you know, you could do that. And I thought, well, if you could do that, you know, why can't we just kind of push the shapes around a little bit too?
When I got the opportunity to work on the Howling, the big attraction to do the picture was that we would actually get to do something very different than what was done in the past, and we would actually change a guy of about 5'10" into about a 10-foot tall werewolf. We took molds of the actor, making, you know, werewolf kind of faces. And then inside of that is basically a skeletal system that has like basically hydraulic devices and air devices and cables and levers that when you actually pull and push, the skeleton underneath would start to stretch and change from that of a human skull to more of a dog-like or a wolf skull. And as this, you know, stretches out and we can still move the mouth, you know, on the inside with the cables, then the teeth would also stretch and the teeth would grow.
We put together the pieces that we thought were the neatest, and sometimes the mistakes were part of the best part. You know, we imagined it as a very smooth, flowing kind of a transformation, but then sometimes the little hydraulics would pop out suddenly, and we thought, oh, what a mistake. But then when we put a sound effect on it, it was a crunching bone effect. So we sort of backed into the whole concept of the bones crunching, and one of the things that makes it really so unpleasant. When we were making the Howling, we were trying to tell a story, and the werewolf transformations were part of the story. That wasn't the reason we made the picture. And I think later there were films that were made entirely because they had effects in them, and then they figured out a reason to make the picture so they could use the effects.
The Thing was the most amazing stuff. I mean, Rob did every trick in the book in that. That was the one thing that did piss me off about The Thing, was it was like everything that Rob and I ever talked about as young, aspiring guys. He used every single one of those things. Wouldn't it be nice to do this? He did it.
Clear! Clear.
I thought psychologically, if I was this creature, what I'd have to do is send out some sort of a decoy to you know, get their attention off of the part of me that's going to split the room. So out of the stomach, right, I spit another creature up on the ceiling, so everybody's attention is up there looking at this new creature. Well, while they're doing that, I thought a really fun thing to do would be to actually, since, you know, we think of our head as being the central, you know, thinking organism, you know, I thought, okay, I want my head to escape the room. So we did this thing where the neck starts to stretch, and then finally it you know, severs right into the skin, breaks. And then underneath it, you see like this stuff that looks like asparagus stretching, you know, vegetable stretching, and all this goo, you know, popping and stuff like that. And then it oozes down the side of the table, and it drops on the floor. And people in the audience are just going, yeah, I don't believe this.
Jesus, it's not just that the special effects are wonderful and gory and hideous, and you know, the whole audience going, ugh, ugh, and looking through their fingers. But the idea that you can't tell friend from foe, it shares that with the alien. You're never sure what the alien is going to turn into.
It gets underneath the desk, right? Then it tips up on, you know, upside down, so the chin is facing upwards, so the head is now upside down. And then the final transformation to escape from the room is, I need some legs quick, and another set of telescopic eyeballs so I can peek around corners, right? So I had spider legs grow out of the ears and the nose and the back of the head.
It ceases to be something that we recognize. It just becomes tentacles and not pus, but membranous something or other, scooting and I mean, It's a wonderful effect. It's a wonderful effect.
It's the most rewarding thing to just sit down with an audience and just sitting there going, oh my God, they believe it. They actually fell for it. They fell for it, you know. Because when it comes down to it, it's a bunch of rubber and, you know, metal.
And goo.
And goo, lots of goo.
The Fly is, you know, one of the gooeyest movies ever made. Where the flesh is the flesh is actually falling off and with that kind of hideous sound. And part of it, I think, you know, the reasons for this, you know, I think there is some sort of visceral horror of like the body's secretions and excretions that a lot of people feel. In addition to that, certain directors, I think, have a sort of overgrown adolescent side. And I mean, I remember those people when I was growing up, you know, who would pop a pimple in front of you just to see the look on your face. And I think David Cronenberg and some people like that have never quite outgrown that.
I needed my version of Brundle to be articulate almost to the end. For me, that was the whole point of the movie, was that he would try to understand what was happening to it, try to accommodate it, to change the reality of it.
I'm saying I'm an insect who dreamt he was a man and loved it. But now the dream is over and the insect is awake.
No, Sid.
I'm saying I'll hurt you if you stay.
David Cronenberg's approach to The Fly, in that it's, as far as he was concerned, it was sort of a nature film, and he was showing the different stages of The Fly. We took the approach that this skin, the outer exterior of Jeff Goldblum's character, Brundle, was in fact merely the cocoon for this creature forming on the inside. It was actually a pneumatic head. It was basically this head that had been squashed down, compacted to basically an accordion effect, and the mechanism stretched it out, pulled the eyes out to get to these proportions. I mean, really a dramatic change in proportion. It's very difficult to maintain a rubber character on screen for any length of time without a lot of cutaways. And this was such a critical emotional moment in the film, everybody was quite concerned about it.
You spend a lot of time and money and effort trying to get something to happen all in one take, and you find that you want to cut away anyway, because it's the response of the other person in the room that makes it come alive, especially if it is only a puppet. It's the human response that makes it come alive.
Part of the terror in a movie like this is from the audience reaction character, who has to respond to what they're seeing. And so oddly enough, now that it is possible with morphing and computer stuff to do that kind of thing in one shot, I think that in the end we were better off being able to do it the way that we did it, which was in stages, basically.
I think what morphing does is in the history of transformations, for the first time, it allows the viewer to see the transformation exactly as the victim, so to speak, in the film is seeing it. Previously, if you were to see a transformation, the audience member would see cutaways and would see dissolves. Well, that's not really what would happen if a person turns into a werewolf or a T-1000 change shapes. You see it seamlessly, but that had never been possible to translate onto film before until now.
This particular sequence was very difficult to shoot. We would just shoot just the fire all alone, just to get a really good plate of the fire. And then we would start the move again and have the actor run in for the very last segment. So he couldn't get too close to the fire because he would burn up. So we had to wait till the right moment, then he'd run in, stop, and get cued to walk out with the camera. Then we put in the the T-1000 in his chrome stages, or his polyalloy stages, walking out of the fire, and had to match that up to where the actor entered the frame. We had to reflect the entire environment into this metallic shape. And the way we did that is that on the set, we would stand at the point of view of the character and take photographs of everything that it could see. And then back on the computer, we placed those photographs in space in the appropriate position. And then from our camera, where our computer simulation now will reflect those pictures off the metallic creature. The technology is still evolving so much. We haven't even come anywhere near the limits. The kinds of things that strike me that people sometimes wonder about is, will we be able to make another film with an actor who's dead, like Marilyn Monroe? Could we go back and change a film? Like, let's take the clothes off of, you know, some famous actress in a film. Those kinds of things are definitely possible. Right now, it'd be very, very hard to achieve, very expensive, very difficult, but there's definitely, that thing will definitely occur.
You know, people that do the kind of work that I do, you know, kind of started feeling threatened by the computer and this stuff. And a lot of people who work for me are going, oh man, we're never, you know, we're going to be out of a job. We're going to be out of a job. What are we going to do? And I said, no, it's, this is a useful tool. You know, I mean, you can do things with the computer that we can't do. There's limits to what we can do, you know. And as a person who enjoys this type of movie, you know, I mean, I like to see things that I haven't seen before.
The transformation sequence, in fact, over the next few years will grow more and more audacious. And you'll no longer simply have a skeleton being transformed into a body, or Dr. Jekyll being transformed into Mr. Hyde, or someone being transformed into a werewolf, but that in fact the entire world will start transforming itself. Walls will disappear, furniture will turn into other kinds of objects, entire masses of people will transform themselves into beings in front of your eyes. The transformation sequence is probably just beginning.
Terminator 2 will be available for rental on February the 17th. So now you can watch 1,000 kneecaps being shattered in the comfort of your own home,